Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday, the 22nd of February, and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So lots going on, Phil, since the last week's podcast, because we've had NADA, which took place last weekend. Well, it started last weekend in Vegas. So and there's been plenty on social media from the various delegates there, because there's always a big UK showing over there from dealers, suppliers, and OEMs.
Yeah, and it'll be good to try and get somebody on at some point in the coming week to talk about what their sort of findings were from the US, because there's always things that they do come back with that they liked from conferences and things like that they did attend. So we'll try and do some work on that and see if we can get somebody on just to talk through what they thought of NADA this year. But we kept away from it, didn't we, this time?
We did, yes. But do you remember, it's probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we actually did a live broadcast from NADA in LA. It was me and Robin Luscombe, because we were out there together, and we were live on the Motor Trade Radio podcast.
Can you remember how many steps you did whilst you were over there? 'Cause, I think you were counting your steps whilst you were both over there, I think, at the time.
Yeah, I think at the time I was in training for the London Marathon, so it was perfect. It was that absolute perfect timing.
Yeah, and the other thing that's hit the sort of news and social over the sort of week is that Motor Trader have published their top 50 movers and shakers. So if you've not seen that in the social media, then have a look out for it, and you can see it on their website. But Darren Edwards holds the top spot in number one, followed by Eddie Hawthorne from Arnold Clark, Robert Forrester there in third place, Dash Gupta in fourth from Marshall Motor Group, and Andy Barrett there from Ford, Alex Smith from VW, Neil Williamson from Jardine Motor Group, Gary Savage from Mercedes, Benz Cars UK, and then in 9th and 10th place is James Brearley from Inchcape, and Matt Lavery, who we had on recently, as well as the others from Cambria. So those are the sort of top 4 spots. But we saw a little bit from PSA, because PSA was saying that they've got 3 people, haven't they, in the top 50 this year as well.
Yes, yeah, they did quite a bit of activity on social media, sort of highlighting that, which was good. I reckon we must have been bubbling under, Phil.
We're just there. I think we're just outside that top 50 there. Yeah,
51 or 2, somewhere around there.
Something like that. Yeah. So we've got some good headlines this week, haven't we? So quite a broad spectrum of headlines to go through.
Yeah, so headlines this week. We've got Ford to cut 180 dealers in the UK. We've got 3 connected stories. So the first one is CAFE regulations cause supply challenges for new cars in January. Used car inventories dropped 12% as dealers face reduced part exchanges, which was also in January. And the third story, the link story there, is auctions forecast strong market going into the March plate change. So elsewhere, we've also got dealers are being urged to review underutilized Facebook inventory ads to increase sales. So there's an easy one there, folks. Pendragon's got a new boss at last, so we've got an update on that. Car dealers quite an interesting one here, because this is a sort of glass half full, half empty, but it's car dealers only record 63% of after-sales customer data. So we'll discuss later whether or not that's good or bad.
That's it. Yeah. It's an interesting way of spinning that headline on that one, I noticed. So.
Yes, yeah. And finally, this week we've got an update on do you remember that Tesla Roadster that was fired into space 2 years ago?
It's still there.
It's still there, yeah. And we will tell you where it is.
Yeah, and get ready for that one. If you've got 4 minutes 13 seconds of your life that you wish to lose, then there's a video for you to watch as well of it. So we'll get to that one later. So the first story then, Curtis, is, and this was broken on the Auto Retail Agenda, just actually after our podcast on the Saturday. This was on the Sunday evening. And this is, as you say at the start of the show there, that Ford to cut 180 dealers, and it was subsequently followed up by other trade media. But this is really, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, haven't we? I mean, they've got a 400 strong dealer network, and they're looking at improving the profitability of that network, and part of that is to reduce the number of dealers that represent Ford in the UK by 180. And I think this has been talked about quite a bit previous on the podcast, hasn't it? Because we've talked obviously about the VW. Robert Forrester referred to it in the interview recently about the reduction, as you know, he bought 4 sites, but during the acquisition, I think 1 or 2 got closed in that process. We've seen with the PSA in terms of that merger between the Vauxhall, Peugeot and Citroën businesses that we're starting to see. So dual and triple representation there. So you can understand this, can't you, in a way? And I think when we spoke previously, and you think about these Ford dealerships, and you do drive through little villages, don't you?
Yes,
Off on
yeah.
B roads, that there's a dealership there. It's got maybe 1 or 2 cars in the showroom, probably CI standards, that's probably 15 years out of date, and a few used cars and an MOT place there, that and maybe a bit of a petrol forecourt there as well. And I don't know, you just wonder how many of those are incorporated with this new strategy of theirs as well.
I think that's the absolute key to the story. And you know what, funnily enough, it's probably getting on for 8 or 9 years ago. We when I was on Motor Trader, we actually worked with Ford to target some of these rural communities where Ford wanted to infill and open new sites in serving these communities. But it looks as though that they've reviewed their network strategy. As you say, they've got over 400 dealers in the UK. So this story is all about how they will reduce this network. And so the auto retail agenda actually spoke to Andy Barrett, who's the chief exec of Ford, and he confirmed that they'll be shedding 30 dealers a year. Although the numbers don't actually stack up, because the story does suggest that Ford will reduce its network to around 220 dealers by 2024. So that rate would have to accelerate. But Andy Barrett does make it quite clear that the dealers that they do lose, they will have conversations with them about becoming authorized repairers if it's appropriate. But this preempts a dealer. It's described as an investor conference on the 26th of February, which I'm kind of assuming is a sort of dealer conference, and this is where Ford will roll out their plans and make it a bit clearer. But within the story, it does make it quite clear that this will not affect the Ford stores. These big retail centres. We're really talking about the smaller satellite sites.
Yeah, no, it's right, and you can see why. We talked around the January new car performance figures, didn't we, and the challenges that are facing there. We're talking next around the new CAFE regulations and things like this. So you can see how that new car market has been challenging, and the profitability has an impact on dealers from that. So anything that the manufacturers can do to increase that sales per outlet ratio is added value to the dealers at the end of the day. So it's one that we'll be watching very closely. So on that, we're moving quickly to the next story in terms of, this was based on some of the sort of monthly dealer stats that we carry out at Cox Automotive and I share with some of the media and some contacts across the network. And Motor Trader have picked up and pulled out the fact that the CAFE regulation caused supply challenges in January. And I think we did talk a little bit about that, didn't we, on the January new car performance, where we saw the increase and decreases by some of the registrations compared to where they were last year, but obviously what they'd done in December as well. So you could see where products had been pulled out of January, put into December to keep away from the CAFE targets, and others were brought forward. But within this, And this is really talking about the coronavirus and the impact that's starting having, and that's hit the headlines elsewhere this week, hasn't it? Because around that supply of parts through the aftermarket and vehicles, depending what vehicles you're looking at, coming into the UK because of restrictions on movement and transportation.
Yeah, because there was a curious headline in the Financial Times about JLR flying in car parts in suitcases, which with JLR they've got 2 weeks worth of supply of parts to keep the factories rolling in the UK. But with the coronavirus, no one really knows what happens after those 2 weeks. So, this is a story that's growing.
Yeah, and somebody's actually said, as we've been talking about, JLR are reported to cease production due to part supply issues from China. And interestingly, I think I was talking to somebody else this week, not necessarily in our sector, but in the computer component sector, they've already started to see a rise in costs of parts for laptops and things like that. So motherboards and things like this, that things are just starting to creep up in price because they're not getting the products coming through from China that they would normally get through. And whether it is the supply and demand imbalance or it's just people taking advantage of the situation, we don't know. But there is reports that there is an impact starting to be seen in certain manufacturers in the UK automotive sector.
Yeah, and in fact, during the week, Apple warned that it won't meet its next quarterly revenue forecast, and they cited the impact of the coronavirus.
So it is having an impact in lots of areas at the minute, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So on to the next story, over to AM Online. And this has actually come from eBay Motors Group. And this is continuing some of their research and analysis that they've been looking at. And the headline is used car inventories dropped 12% as dealers faced reduced part exchange volumes. And it's kind of linked to what we were talking about earlier in that new car market. So part exchanges aren't coming in as they would normally come in, and the supply isn't necessarily there, which we'll talk about next, in the wholesale market either.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's supply and demand. So January saw used stock volumes averaging 58 units across dealer forecourts, and that compared with 66 units 12 months ago. So that's where the fall of 12% comes from. But December stock levels actually averaged 62.5 units. So is kind of showing the movement of direction there. Interestingly, within it, Dermot Kelleher from eBay Motors Group says stock levels were lean in January with a number of factors limiting supply, including a fall in Part X's following a 14% drop in private registrations in the new car market.
Yeah, and he cites out some of the fastest selling cars as well, doesn't he, in January? So the fastest selling used car in January was the Vauxhall Antera, which averaged 33.6 days, followed by the Citroën DS3 at 33.9 days, and followed by the Ford Grand C-Max at 35 days as well.
Yep.
So interesting, lots of stats there, and I think I would probably suggest heading over to that story and have a look at some of the analysis and some of the year-on-year performances that have been displayed there on AM Online from eBay Motors Group, starting to show that joining that sort of three-way business now is starting to pull out some very interesting and insightful stats from that business.
Yeah, you're right, because there's some interesting stats on the way car supermarkets were affected. So they actually ended up stocking 42 fewer units in January year on year. So do head over to that, because there's plenty more stats and graphs.
Definitely. And then the next one, actually, we were just saying about earlier there that this is in the motortrader.com, and this has come from NAMA, so the National Association of Motor Auctions, and so it's forecasting a strong wholesale market going into March plate change. And this is about that supply. We've got a I was talking about it this week with Andy Condy from Mannheim, that we're in a position now that we didn't really see a slowdown coming up to Christmas and the New Year. It carried straight on into January. The dealers sort of came straight out of the blocks, very quick start into the new year. Conversion rates have maintained very strong. The values have maintained very strong performance as well, and we've seen that from Cafe HPI with their values that they published for February, and still reporting a strong performance for March as well. So again, it's this supply and demand, and we've seen this, what we're calling as a Boris bounce, in terms of consumer index confidence and business confidence, and we've just not got the supply coming through in masses of volumes, have we?
No, and there's an interesting quote here from Lewis Wallace, who's the head of NAMA. She says, the auction market has started 2020 strongly, with demand for auction stock being high. Dealers, since the beginning of the year, have been resupplying their forecourts, having reduced stock levels during the last months of 2019. So with volume levels starting to plateau and potentially fall, values and conversion rates are likely to remain high.
Yeah, and they've talked obviously about the pre-Euro 6 van values as well.
Yes.
There's been some 8% saying, thinking that they will decrease, but obviously 92% of the respondents think they will stay the same or increase, with demand remaining strong for the older vehicles. So again, strength is there in the LCV market as well at the minute.
Yeah, so you're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector, and available online at motortraderadio.com and by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Deezer, and SoundCloud.
And heading over to the next story, and we're going over to Car Dealer magazine this week as well. And you alluded to it earlier on, that, and you do see a little bit of this, don't you? Those dealers that have engaged with social media and those that haven't. And we were talking before the show about the change 12 months ago to the way your adverts are linked within that social space. And the headline from Car Dealer is, dealers urged to review underused Facebook inventory adverts to increase their sales. So very interesting story, this one, and very apt from the guys at Honcho there.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The key to this story is 12 months ago, Facebook changed the way that the automotive inventory ads work. So previously, they were only linked to dealer websites, but they're now actually linked to social media. So it's opened up that audience, but dealers aren't necessarily aware. So if they are using Facebook inventory ads, they're not being utilized as much as they can. So within this piece, and again, it's worth heading over to Car Dealer to have a look at the story. It does point out a couple of just sort of best practice solutions which will help get the most out of these inventory ads, because one of the guys at Honcho points out that some dealers just bundle everything onto the same page, whereas if you're promoting, say, new car stock, as we're coming up to the plate change, then put it on one page. Put that particular brand or that particular model on one page. Don't try and bundle it in with everything else, because it'll be a lot more user friendly once it gets circulated within the inventory ads.
Definitely, and they talk there about the dealers who have adopted the Facebook automotive inventory adverts are likely to see a large increase in their paid social returns, with conversion rates rising by at least 25% there. So they are calling out that those that are not doing it should really start thinking about doing it, particularly in the franchise dealer market ahead of the plate change there, as you say. But I know this morning, when people are listening to this podcast, there'll be independent dealers that I know that are very much connected with that that the Facebook and the whole Google adverts, etc. Because I've actually been to a couple of workshops on that with some of the independent dealers from the IMDA there, and really trying to maximise on the opportunities that this gives that dealer now.
Yeah, and it's interesting what Honcho say about the cost savings there, because they're saying that the Facebook inventory ads can be up to 40% cheaper than Google ads. So it really is an easy win here.
Definitely. So over to the next story, and I feel like we've mentioned this a few times now, but it has been announced this week. AM Online is the story we're talking about here, and that the Pendragon have actually appointed their new chief executive, and he has been with the group since April of 2019 as a non-exec director, and since October 2019 he's been sort of performing as an interim role as executive chairman, but he is now being officially appointed as the CEO, and that is Bill Berman, who is actually he's ex-AutoNation, isn't he, from the US there. So I mean, that is one sizable business there with 26,000 associates, as they call themselves over in the US there, and 300 plus new vehicle franchises. So that is one sizable business.
Yeah, and Bill Berman, he is an industry veteran. He's been in the sector for over 30 years. So this is welcome news really for Pendragon, because Con, let's be honest, they have been through a period of turmoil. Their last chief exec, Mark Herbert, was only in the post for 3 months when he left last June, and he of course followed Trevor Finn, who had been in the post for a number of years.
Yeah,
I mean 10, 15 years, long time. So that this is really welcome news. And AutoNation, as you say, they're huge operators in the States. I mean, they really are the big operators. In fact, they are the largest retailer in the US. So I think we can assume a lot of best practices will be coming over here as a result of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think looking at the share prices there, I think it's still a little bit early days for the share prices to react, because obviously it's an announcement, but they'll be waiting for what his strategies are and what to expect from them. But you can expect the share in the city, share prices in the city, to start to react to this one, because I think he has got the credentials, hasn't he, to make a difference, and I think there'll be a lot of employees there at Pendragon that will be glad that there is somebody now in the chair, and they might see some sort of direction that they not saying they've not necessarily had for some time, but I think just having a permanent CEO there now to drive the business forward is going to be welcome news, and the fact that he is from such a big business over in the US there will be fantastic news for the operation. So one that we'll be watching very closely and expect to see what happens at the next financial announcements as well.
Yep. So next story from AM Online. The headline is "Car dealers accurately record just 63% of after-sales customer data." Now, we talked about this before the show, and we didn't think that was too shabby, did we?
No, I thought it was all right, really. It's kind of like you said, reverse odd headline, but I think it's AM trying to pick out on that one, but it is actually an increase, isn't it, compared to what it was last year?
You're right, because the context is that the last time they reported on this, which was 9 months ago, this is from Marketing Delivery, that figure was 30%. So it's grown from 30% to 63% in 9 months. So that's definitely heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and they're talking about 86% of records included a suggested date for the vehicle's next scheduled service, whilst an MOT due date was noted in 90% of the vehicles over the 3-year period. So I for back in my day as running car businesses, I think those figures are pretty acceptable. I mean, all right, everybody wants 100%, but I think for this, I think the fact that they're recording 86% of when that next service is due and 90% of when the next MOT is due is good news, really, I think, with this kind of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it does also highlight the importance of reminders. So prior research from Marketing Delivery suggested 60% of motorists are more likely to book a service or MOT with a workshop that actually reminds them that that the work needs to be done. Of course, that's dependent on having accurate records. So, probably not as bad as it sounds.
No, I don't think so, personally. And then we've got a interesting, and finally, and you did mention it at the start of the show there, and this is a new media for the podcast, and this is car scoops that we're heading over to here, and this is that here's where Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster is after 2 years in space, and there's some nice images there, and I think they've been a little bit creative with the display there on the dashboard of the Roadster. I'm not sure what he's actually watching on that video, but it's probably not as interesting.
Is it Elon Musk dancing?
Is it? I think it could possibly be, yeah.
It might be, yeah. So doing a bit of a dad dance there.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the Tesla Roadster, which went into space 2 years ago. So where is it? So it's travelled apparently 1 billion miles since being shot into space in February 2018. As it stands, the Tesla is said to be approximately 215.6 million miles from Earth, and it's travelling at 6,000 miles per hour. Now, you mentioned the video. There is a video purporting to show what that 6,000 miles per hour looks like, and it looks though it's stationary.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, I did have to check that YouTube was still playing, because it was that slide until you actually see the clock counting down that actually does indicate there is actually movement on the screen. It was very slow indeed, but I don't know, what do you say? I mean, it's an achievement. You can't deny that, can you? It's he's set out to do what he wanted to do, which is to get a car into space. It's still there after, well, I say it's still there after 2 years. It takes a while to get there, doesn't it? To be fair, but I wonder what will happen to that car when it does come back, if it comes back, and in what state it will be back if it does.
Well, yeah, because that's a few miles on the clock.
Yeah, with little wear and tear to the tyres.
Yeah, a little bit of radiation damage, perhaps.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, again, head over to Car Scoops there. So that's some nice little images there, and like I say, a little short video, but again, I'm sure there'll be a lot more to come, as we know from Elon Musk there and what he has plans for the future. So like you said right at the start, I mean, busy week, lots going on, still early on in terms of getting some of the sort of feedback and key findings from NADA. By all accounts, again, fantastic event. I believe it was there at Las Vegas, which is the one that everybody seems to want to head out to, and I'm sure there'll be lots to come back on that one, and hopefully we'll try and get somebody to talk about if they went and what their key findings were there from NADA, and maybe we'll see more from Bill there at Pendragon with his sort of thoughts on the way they've been doing things over there in the US and what he's got in store for Pendragon.
Yeah, so you've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector. Many thanks for tuning in. Do join us again next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.